Now that we've finished discussing the negatives, I have a little quiz. 5 questions to ask yourself to see if the Staccato HD P4 is worth getting. Hey everyone, I'm Brett, and welcome to Nightwood Guns. This is the review we've all been waiting for. Today we are looking at the Staccato HD P4. Now when I got to test this out at SHOT Show, it left some strong impressions with me, but a few of my opinions have changed now that I've spent 1,000 rounds in about a week shooting it. Overall, objectively speaking, it's a great gun. I just don't particularly like it, and you might not like it either. This pistol seems like it was made for a very specific crowd, and I'm just not sure that I'm the target market for this. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am a 2011 enjoyer and a Glock enjoyer. I like both of these platforms. So you would think that the marrying of those two platforms would be right up my alley, but it seems like blending the two made sacrifices to both platforms when they combined them. And honestly, in a lot of ways, this feels like a Gen 1 version of the gun. Like, I see several ways they could improve this thing. Now, that does not mean that this is a bad gun by any means. It's a great gun. I'm just struggling to see the value of the hefty price tag on this compared to normal 2011 pistols. Now, I shot 1,000 rounds of Buffalo Creek 115 grain target ammo through this thing. There's something on screen there to help you out. So as per the usual, I'm going to go over the features, talk about the things that I like, talk about the actual shooting performance and reliability of the pistol, and then of course we will hop into the things that I don't like very much and the negatives. So right off the bat, Staccato kept a lot of things that have worked on their other products, such as the slide serrations that are decently done. The thing I like about them is they wrap around the top of the pistol, so if you need to rack it from an unconventional position, you still have some grippiness along the top of the slide. They have milled these little ledges into the frame. You could use this one as a thumb ledge. I don't apply pressure with my thumb to the gun, so that doesn't really apply to me. However, I do like the ledge on the shooting side of the gun because it acts as a nice index point to keep my finger off the trigger. Nice tactile place for me to just be confident that my finger's nowhere near the trigger if I'm in the dark or if there are friendlies running around. If you're a subscriber, you will know that I am picky and a stickler for grip texture, and the Staccato HD P4 nails it. This is a perfect grip texture. It is just on the cusp of being too aggressive for carry up against your skin, but it is not uncomfortable by any means. It offers excellent traction so that you can really have control over this as far as the recoil goes. And of course, the other great thing about the grip texture is it goes all the way up to the top of the gun. So when you have a nice high grip on the pistol, your hand is contacting all of this lovely texture for that good traction that I'm always looking for on a pistol. And yes, it does maintain traction if your hands are wet, sweaty, slimy, or sticky. This gun was also designed so you can get a very high shooting grip on it, just a little higher than a standard 2011, and that's usually a welcome feature on a pistol. So this makes the recoil impulse feel pretty darn good, but it comes with some downsides. I will see you in negatives. Now, one of the big reasons you're able to get such a high grip on the pistol is because they completely deleted the grip safety. Now, I grew up shooting almost exclusively 1911s for semi-automatic pistols, so I am no stranger to grip safeties. They don't bother me at all. It's my opinion that the grip safety delete on pistols like this is going to become more common in the coming years. Now, this is mostly going to be a great feature for people who are coming over from exclusively Glock or striker-fired pistols, because whenever you have someone who's been shooting Glocks for, 10 or 20 years, and then you give them a 2011 or a 1911 for the first time ever, the grip safety can be a bit of a challenge, so this is a nice little bridge into the 2011 world for those people. However, from my observations, it is usually a bigger obstacle to get used to the manual thumb safety than it is the grip safety, so I'm not really sure how necessary the grip safety delete is, but if you always hated the grip safety, here you go. They've also moved away from an internal extractor to this external extractor right here. There are pros and cons to both, but it seems the general consensus right now is that external extractors are kind of the future of this type of platform. Now, working our way down the grip, I love this lip that they put down here on the bottom of the gun near the magwell area. You can get some excellent leverage with your support hand that, again, make this gun feel extremely manageable when shooting fast. Next up, we gotta talk about how this thing can take Glock magazines, and they worked with MechGar to make an 18-round metal-bodied Glock-compatible magazine. Now, I've heard some conflicting things on this. It did work in my Glocks, but your mileage may vary. But the best part about these mags is they are very cheap. So once they're more available, I think these things are going to take off, and a Generation 2 will probably be the penultimate Glock magazine. So the fact that it takes Glock mags is going to be a huge selling factor for anybody who has a Glock in their holster right now, and they feel like they're not in the cool kids club because they don't have a Staccato, but they have 200 Glock magazines, 0 2011 mags, and that's one of their biggest hangups. But other benefits include cheaper mags and less sensitive magazines for reliability. You don't have to worry about protecting your feed lips or making sure that they're tuned once you get thousands of rounds through them, or if you've just dropped them a bunch from reloading. This is not a huge selling feature for me because I don't mind 2011 mags. I have a lot of them because I have 2011s. Now, when I posted a short featuring the Staccato HD, the one comment that I got all the time is that the rear sight, the backup iron, is really ugly, almost directly in the middle of the gun. And yeah, I got no argument for that. The benefit of having the iron sight in front of the optic, though, is one, they were able to move it back. So if you're rocking an SRO or an RMR HD, you don't have to worry about any overhang over the ejection port that could lead to a malfunction. And if you're running something like a HoloSun 507 comp, that will act as a little guard to protect that little bit of glass that bulges out over the actual housing of the dot. So if you need to rack it off of something really hard, you're hitting the rear sight instead of the optic. And finally, it also keeps your optic from getting completely blasted with carbon and fouling up, making it hard to see through. All right, let's talk about the trigger. This is a Series 80 trigger. If you're unfamiliar with that, it means that it has a firing pin block in it. Now, why does it have a firing pin block in there when other 2011s don't? Well, it's simply because there was quite a bit of internet buzz when people rediscovered that 1911s or 2011s with a Series 70 trigger, no firing pin block, will go off when dropped from shoulder height. Now for me, that's never been an issue because I've never dropped a gun from shoulder height. And also, most importantly, the only way it will go off is if it is dropped muzzle down, which means if it goes off, where's the bullet going? Into the ground. You could absolutely get smacked by spalling and fragments of concrete. But unlike some SIG products that will go off like that, the bullet's not going to go into the air and hit some poor innocent child a mile away. Now, the reason in the past with 1911s that Series 80 triggers have not been as desirable as a Series 70 trigger is because it does change the trigger pull a little bit. Now, when I got to shoot this thing at SHOT Show, it didn't really feel like a Series 80 trigger. This one does, and over 1,000 rounds, it didn't break in or smooth out. So what that means is the actual take-up is going to be spongy, mushy, crunchy until you hit the wall. Then the actual press is like any other 1911 or 2011 trigger press. Very short travel, and the break itself is very crisp. The reset is also very short and tactile. And from that reset, you can pull straight through that wall again. And this is why you can shoot this gun extremely fast. Just like a Series 70, when you are ripping with this thing at high speed and you're just going just past that wall or to the wall, that's where this gun's trigger is more capable than something like a Glock trigger. Even a really good Glock trigger, like the Johnny Glock's trigger, it's just easier to shoot this thing faster and maintain accuracy when shooting it that fast. However, the reason that the Series 80 trade-off isn't worth it to me is because when you are getting that first shot or taking a precision shot and you're getting through that take-up, it is a heavier, tensioned, mushy, crunchy take-up. And since I can be a little snobby with triggers, that makes my skin crawl. But I think the reason it's actually worth bringing up and discussing is because it almost feels like the take-up is heavier than the actual trigger press itself from the wall. I've had a few times where I've been trying to pull through the take-up and hit the wall, and since it's a heavier tension take-up, I just blew through the wall and the gun went off. Maybe that's because I have tens of thousands of rounds through 1911s and 2011s with Series 70 triggers, but you are losing a little bit of performance over a Series 70 trigger, and I would argue that an Apex trigger and a Smith & Wesson M&P is better than this trigger on my Staccato HD P4. And once you look at the difference in cost between the two, it makes you start to question things. That being said, if you're not already a 2011 guy and you are coming from Glocks, this is a significant improvement in trigger, and if this is an approved duty gun for your department or agency, you're in a situation where you can't really throw aftermarket parts into your gun, then this is a large improvement. I got a little ahead of myself with the potential negative there, but the next feature is the full ambidextrous controls. This gun's actually very lefty friendly, so most guns like this have an ambi thumb safety, so that's not really an issue. But this one has a reversible magazine release, so you can make it 100% lefty, and it has an ambi slide stop. That can also be good for righties if you're someone who has always wanted to drop the slide with your index finger over here instead of having to reach over with your support thumb, because slide stops on 2011s can be very difficult to reach with your shooting hand. Now this gun also has an extended slide stop. I wear a medium-sized glove and I still can't quite reach it. I can just barely get the edge of my thumb on the corner of the slide stop, and it's not enough to be able to close the slide reliably under stress. If I wanted to use it, I would have to break my grip just a little bit to completely get the leverage required to send the slide home. Since this was designed for duty, it does have a flush fit magazine release, so you don't have to worry about your magazine coming unseated. And they did elongate it a little bit so it's easier to reach with your thumb, even though it's flush fit. Now let's talk about fit and finish. It is a Staccato, so it is near perfect. Slide to frame fit maybe has a 0.5% of wiggle. It's 99.5% solid. Barrel lockup is 100%. The only thing really worth noting is that when they were installing the front sight on this, it looks like they marred the finish in that dovetail. It's just bare metal right there. Not the end of the world for me, but I know a lot of you guys will drop this kind of dime on something, and that would really irritate you, so figure it's worth mentioning. This also has a DLC finish, which is the single best black finish that you can put on any pistol. Very corrosion resistant, extremely resistant to wear, and the gun has been completely melted and dehorned, so it doesn't have any sharp or pokey spots anywhere on it. And of course, this thing has a bull barrel, so it has the best possible recoil impulse with that non-reciprocating weight up there. And the recoil spring assembly has a plastic or a nylon shock buff. When you first get it out of the box, the thing rattles like a baby rattle. It's a very similar system to what's in the HK USP Compact, and very similar to that, once you get a few rounds through it and it gets dirtied up with carbon, it stops rattling. Now, because of that high grip you can get on the gun and the way that they designed the recoil spring assembly, this gun does feel like it has a better recoil impulse than a Staccato C2 or a Staccato P. How much better? I don't know, like 3%, 5%. One of the first things I did with this pistol is I ran a fast drill with it cold just to see how I would do, and I got a decently fast time. The only thing that held me up was the reload. Again, I'll see you in negatives. But even with these iron sights, which again, I'll see you in negatives, I was able to effortlessly run this thing very efficiently. I didn't notice any issues with accuracy. I benched it at 10 yards to see how it would do. It performed extremely well, and it ran 100% reliably through 1,000 rounds of FMJ and a couple of magazines of my Federal HST 124 plus P jacketed hollow points. The last thing I want to mention in this category before we move on is that this gun feels more like a duty pistol than it does a performance pistol. It very much feels like, what if we took this and made it like this, instead of what if we took this and made it feel like this, if that makes any sense at all. Now, before we hop into the negatives, if you've been enjoying this video or if you've enjoyed videos of mine in the past, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That is the #1 way you can support me. Leaving a comment down below is also extremely helpful, and I really appreciate you guys chiming in down there, even if you're just dropping your favorite emoji. But beyond that, don't forget to hit that like, thumbs up button, and check out the links in the description below, because that's where you can find all the further ways to support the channel. I'm always so grateful for my patrons. You guys help keep the lights on here and keep me motivated when times get really tough, especially with YouTube and gun channels. You know how it is. All right, it is honest channel time. Let's tear this thing apart. No, it's not that bad, but worth talking about. So first of all, I'm sure you've noticed there is no optic on this pistol. That's because on launch, you could not get optic plates for this thing. They are just now starting to show up to retailers and starting to ship, but I think for this price point, it's really scummy not to include an optic plate. At a bare minimum, I expect the Walther program, where it comes with a QR code that you scan and you can select which plate you want and they will ship it to you. However, when you start hitting price points like these, I expect the Bull Armory treatment, where they're like, congratulations on purchasing an excellent double stack 1911 performance duty pistol. Here are all of your plates. You do not have to wait around to mount an optic. unlike this. So while a lot of owners like myself were complaining that we couldn't even get optic plates for this at launch, that is not going to be a long-term situation. It's only going to be a week one thing, so that part's not worth beating them up about, even though I think it's crappy as a paying customer. I think it's more so scummy that you have to drop like 80 bucks to mount an optic on this, because I consider this gun to be an optic mandatory pistol. These iron sights that come on it are terrible. Some of the worst irons I've ever seen. These are the exact definition of backup iron sights. Now I know what some of you were thinking. When I saw all of the information from SHOT Show, it said it is direct mount. You don't need a plate. Well, it turns out it is direct mount with optic spacers, which is just another version of an optic plate. If you direct mount an optic on here without one of those spacers, all of the stress is on those screws, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how soon is the optic going to shear off of your slide. Staccato should have known what they were doing when they used the words direct mount, but I don't think they care. I got ahead of myself and already talked about the trigger on this thing. If you're a 2011 guy, this is going to be a bit of a disappointment. It's just a little better than a Johnny Glock's trigger in a Glock, and it's just a little worse than an Apex trigger in a Smith & Wesson M&P. I also mentioned the marred dovetail in the front sight already, so now let's jump into ergonomics. So the grip on the Staccato HD feels boxy. It feels very rectangular. Now don't get me wrong, the corners are all rounded off, but it still has a boxy feel in hand. And they also went really skinny with the side panel area of the grips. You can see where it's fatter up here and then it kind of goes in and is concave on the way down. Now the issue I have with that is it makes it difficult for my support hand to find any kind of geometry to get additional traction or leverage on. In this skinny caved in area right there, I can feel my hand almost slipping through it, versus a normal 2011 that is straight all the way down and it has this little bit of geometry right there for leverage to help me get control over the pistol. Is it terrible? By no means. Is it a downgrade from a standard 2011? Yeah. On the topic of ergonomics, curiously, this trigger guard is also not double undercut. So you can see on this Staccato XC, we have the undercut here, and then it bulges out and then goes back in for a double undercut so that you can get a comfortable high grip with your support hand. But over here, this thing just looks like a Glock trigger guard. And you know what? In hand, it feels like a Glock trigger guard. Is this the end of the world? No. At this price point, is it a little surprising? Yeah, it should probably be double undercut. And look at how thick the trigger guard is too. It's a wide boy, that's for sure. All right, the final part of ergonomics that bother me happens in the grip safety delete area right up here. This little corner on the safety, since there's no grip safety there to kind of act as a buffer, when I am shooting with my thumb riding on the safety like a shelf, which is proper technique for these guns, I have a little bit of a hot spot there that feels like it's poking me or pinching me. Now this is more so an annoyance than anything else. It's not a deal breaker for me. However, if you have smaller hands, I had my wife shoot this thing. It was unbearable for her. It's one of those things where she couldn't get through a couple of rounds without just wanting to move her thumb off of the safety and to the outside of her support hand just to get away from the pain. So the smaller your hand gets, the more that's going to poke you if you are shooting it with proper technique. Something else that's a little annoying for me is without the grip safety there to act as a buffer, once again, when I take the safety off, it pinches my hand in this little area where the frame meets the safety. So the safety will close down on that part of the frame and just pinch my hand because I have a really high grip on the gun and I'm gripping it hard. So my skin will fill that area. And then when I take the safety off, it just pinches me a little bit on the way down. The meat of my hand doesn't get stuck in there. It just kind of pushes it out, but it's still pinchy and a little unpleasant. And finally, without the grip safety being there, you can grip this gun so high, too high, to the point where you actually can't get the safety off because the ambi safety is hitting your shooting finger knuckle. So you do not want to grip this gun too high. Again, it's not a big deal, but the more expensive a gun is, the more nitpicky I get with it. Now earlier, I mentioned that my fast drill got slowed down by my reload, and that is two-part. One, with the MechGar magazine in here, you have to push the magazine release all the way into the gun for the magazine to drop free. You can't push it halfway, you can't push it 2/3, otherwise it will just come out like that. You have to push it all the way in for it to come out. If you have medium or smaller sized hands, it can be difficult with a full shooting grip on the gun to push the magazine release all the way into the body of the gun because it is a flush magazine release. The second part of this is that the gun needs a mag well. They did a really good job beveling the front lip of the mag well to be able to easily get a magazine in there. The backstrap part is beveled okay, like just barely passable. You can still get a magazine caught on that. It doesn't naturally slide in. The biggest problem, however, is that the sides of the mag well are completely straight and have no bevel to them whatsoever. So if you miss it a little bit on the side, it doesn't really go into the gun. There's no funnel to get it in there. In my opinion, this maybe should have been beveled a little more. Maybe there's a reason they couldn't, I don't know. But either way, other Staccatos come with mag wells on them from the factory. And again, a competitor like Bull Armory, not only does it come with a mag well, it also comes with a shorter mainspring housing pin so you can remove the mag well and run it without. When I talked to Staccato at Range Day for SHOT Show, they said that they are going to later introduce mag wells, and it just feels like shrinkflation to me. I hopped on the Staccato bandwagon back when they were including plates with the guns. Now those are out. Now they found a sneaky way to remove the mag well and have you pay for that. And for the record, a Gen 5 Glock has an excellent beveled mag well area, including on the sides. And the final thing worth mentioning in the negatives is that this is a thick girl. When you compare it to even something like the Staccato XC, you can see, especially in that trigger guard area, it's completely beefed out. The rail area is beefed out. Just a beefier, thicker gun in general. I'm not sure I would run this for concealed carry inside the waistband. This kind of seems like a dedicated duty gun to me. Now that we've finished discussing the negatives, I have a little quiz. 5 questions to ask yourself to see if the Staccato HD P4 is worth getting. Question 1. Do you hate that 2011s don't take Glock magazines? Number 2. Do you hate the grip safeties on 2011 pistols? Number 3 is the fact that 2011s are typically not drop safe from shoulder height, muzzle down, so it goes off into the ground, a deal breaker for you. Number 4, are you not a fan of the ergonomics on typical 2011 pistols and you wish they felt a little boxier and more like a Glock? Number 5, are you left-handed? So if you answered yes to 2 or more of those questions, and you've been wanting to get a 2011, and those are the only things that have been holding you back, then I recommend the Staccato HD P4. Otherwise, stick with what you have or get any other double stack 1911 that your heart desires. While the recoil impulse is a little better on the P4 than it is on the P, it's not better enough to be worth the other sacrifices that were made. Like guys, I can accept an expensive pistol if you're paying for an increase in performance, like my Bull Armory EDC Pro here. This is a you get what you pay for situation. But an M&P 2.0 with an Apex trigger and an Apex barrel shoots nearly as good as the Staccato HD P4 for like a quarter of the price. This is where my disconnect is when we start getting into these extremely expensive duty pistols. But I'm also someone who thinks that something like the Staccato P and C2 are overpriced for what they are. I think a big part of what you pay for is the best in industry customer service and lifetime warranty that Staccato offers. As far as actual performance goes, I can't sit here and tell you that this Staccato HD P4 is 4 times better than this M&P 2.0 with an Apex trigger. Now, honestly, I don't know how this video is going to be received. Just know that I am one voice, one opinion, one data point. Take it with a grain of salt. Check out other reviews. Watch out for shills. They are becoming harder to spot. But I genuinely think that this gun is like all hyped up by an insane marketing budget. And that marketing budget is probably baked into the price of the pistol. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video, everyone. Don't forget to make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Drop a comment down below, even if it's just an emoji, and hit that like, thumbs up button. The links in the description below are the place to be if you want to further support the channel. But other than that, it was great seeing you guys again, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm Brett, and this was Nightwood Guns. Nightwood out.